Hey, thanks for joining me today for this episode of Curves Welcome, a podcast about facing and embracing the curves of life. If this is your first time tuning in, this is Susie Carr. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. I'd like to welcome a special guest to the podcast today. She's the founder of NMS Coaching, a motivational speaker, a qualified civil engineer, the host of Seize the Day podcast, and an overall people enthusiast. She's also my partner on our lively Facebook group, Live Your Best Life. Her name is Natalie Miller Snell, and she's here to chat with me today about ways you can start a new journey in life. Natalie, it's great to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Susie. What a lovely introduction. It's great to be. It's so good to see you. 2021. We all look different.
We do. Year. Yes. We definitely, everything's just great. We were just chatting before we actually went live with this, and you were telling me you've revamped your house, your environment to sort of set the stage for 2021 and the newness of your environment to help you just catapult yourself into this year on a good foot, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. We just touched on it very briefly. I found, 2020 was quite a bizarre year. It was so unusual for everybody. And there's a lot of, a feeling of stuck in just generally everything that we did. And I love my office. I absolutely adore it. But one of the things I wanted to do was paint it, redecorate, give it a little bit of new life. And since we're not exposed to any newness outside of, our four walls, really, because we're not seeing anyone, we're not going out, it's a really great opportunity to make everything feel fresh again and new, to give you that new kind of injection of life and push forward. So it's really had the desired effect. I must say, I love it, because I keep seeing my backdrop now, when I'm on Zoom calls, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that looks nice. I'm really happy.
It really looks cool for, obviously, people listening in. They're not seeing this. Your logo is right behind you on a beautiful white canvas, the NMS Coaching Time to Change with an hourglass. I just think that is so cool. It's such a pretty thing. And I love you have a little, is that a frog with big glasses?
It's a frog.
I love it.
I did a vote on Instagram, a poll to get a name. So her name's Roberta, which I think is brilliant. And I lifted the pictures up a bit as well, because what I was finding last year, I used existing nail fittings in the wall. So it was just down a bit too low and it was right behind my head. But now you can see the logo, which is great. Yeah. I've always loved the hourglass. I think it's, it's a time to change, isn't it? It's all about time. It's about seizing the moment, and seize the moment as well. Seize the day for the podcast. So all connects nicely.
Absolutely. Let's talk about a time to change, because we are here today to talk about starting a new journey. Now, many people, especially in the beginning of a new year, it could be you're listening to this in the middle of the existing year, but there's always a time when people feel like they want to make a change. Maybe they're afraid to, maybe there are just too many factors involved. They feel overwhelmed by it. But starting fresh and creating a new paradigm for yourself doesn't have to be as overwhelming as I think people make it. And I wanted to chat with you today because I know that you've made a change in your life. You've taken a new step with your business. Can you just talk a little bit, give people a brief background about your path to where you are today and what you are doing today?
Sure. I suppose let's just rewind a little to what I studied, I suppose, in terms of coming out of university and when I was as young, because I always wanted to help people. So I studied civil engineering. I don't know quite how or why I went down that path, but it was what resonated in terms of my A-levels that I was studying maths, physics, and design and technology. So that's a natural path I went down. And I really enjoyed it. I consider myself quite creative in terms of how my mind works. I like to understand how things operate and, how you make things work and connect it back together. So I spent my life after university in kind of design roles, if you like. So ultimately leading towards a leadership role within store development. So building stores across the globe and leading teams to do that. So from concept through to completion, seeing something in a design phase and then seeing it realized, which was incredibly inspiring and really quite nice. And I suppose lends itself to that newness, because you're always seeing something new, you're seeing something evolve, you're seeing something grow, and there's an element of beauty in that. So I absolutely love what I did, but I always had this thing at the back of my mind: I want to help people. And is what I'm doing, sure, it helps me because financially it's great, it's supporting my family, but what's my purpose? What do I really want to do in terms of investing back into the community, investing back into the world, and just generally helping people? And so I made a decision back in, oh, I forget, do you know, time I'm not sure with at the moment because it's been such a whirlwind. I'm going to say 2019, maybe even 2018, to start looking into studying life coaching so I could actively help folk on the side while I was still working. And I started, so that was part-time outside of working hours. And I was working as a consultant. So this is now the year before last, because 2020 is last year. And I was a consultant, and then COVID hit and I was between employment. And unfortunately, in the UK, how the government support packages work, that if you were in between work, you didn't get any support. So, I mean, in truth, 2020 was a terrifying year at the beginning, because I'd gone from having employment, having an income, albeit through a consultant basis, so, you know, still seeking active employment, to then nothing, literally no income whatsoever. And I really had to do a great deal of reflecting. I did a lot of crying over a lot of wine with a lot of chocolate. I mean, seriously, it was quite, I mean, I did go through a bit of a dark moment as well. But it occurred to me that I've always wanted to help people, as I've mentioned. I could still do what I wanted to do, but I just needed to accelerate that process. And I just really needed to apply myself in a much more constructive, much more efficient, and much more thorough way to make it happen at a more accelerated pace. And that's exactly what I did. I connected with people, Susie. I connected with people outside of my immediate industry, my immediate circle of friends, to just reach out and contact people who had experience, who had knowledge, who might be able to help. And honestly, I can't begin to tell you the volume of kindness I experienced through incredible people who made my year, who helped me massively. And it just went, literally, it catapulted upward after that. Just phenomenal.
What would you say? First of all, that's phenomenal that you've experienced this level of success in this new journey. And yeah, and I would say, just hearing your story, I would attribute that to your positive attitude and your determination to say, this is what I want. This is what I have to do because I have a family to support and I'm going to make this happen. And so that whole phrase, make it happen, is a very powerful affirmation. And it's your why. You knew your why. And I think a lot of people, myself included, during parts of my life when I knew I needed to make a change, but I had no idea how to or why I should. It's because I didn't know my why. And if you don't know why you're doing something, the motivation to continue doing it wanes. And there are going to be, as you said, there are some critical moments when you're starting a new journey that, like, you had no income. You had absolutely no income. Now, most people would just say, okay, forget this. I'm going to go back to what I know. And I'm going to take 5 steps back and just go back to my comfort zone and do what I know. And you didn't do that. You persevered and you were determined and you said, I'm going to make this happen. So kudos to you. And yeah, so what would you say in that respect to somebody who doesn't know their why? Like, how do you determine that? How do you were there a few steps that you could suggest that someone take in order to determine that motivational factor that's going to keep them going during these tough times?
That's a fabulous question. And in fact, actually, one of the things that I did when I reached out to folk last year was to connect with the wonderful coaching community. And I got myself a coach. And that was possibly one of the best things that I did, because during that session and those sessions with Sandra, and for anyone who's listening who doesn't necessarily understand the difference with coaching and therapy and all of those different kinds of services that you can employ, coaching is very much about the listening space. It's about listening to the person you're with and asking sometimes quite loaded questions to get to the root or understand what the barrier is that's preventing somebody from moving forward. Therapy tends to focus on the problem itself and helps you unpack it so you can deal with it. Coaching, listen in that space, and then we help the clients find their own solutions and their own way forward from whatever their challenge is, and they then set the action plan and they're then accountable. So it's quite a powerful environment that you're in. As Stephen Covey, I think, once said, the interesting thing about conversation and dialogue is more often than not, we think we're listening to somebody, but actually we're waiting our turn to speak, which I think is really powerful and very true. So the coaching environment is all about listening and helping. So Sandra, my coach, who I adore, she's absolutely fantastic. I'd highly recommend her to anybody. Coaching, when you seek a coach, it's all about your relationship that you get with somebody. So not everybody is meant for everybody, if that makes sense. You'll find there's a connection there, isn't there?
That makes
Anyway,
sense.
and she would just ask me some really great questions, and she focused a lot on what's my why. And I knew my why was to help people. I knew also I needed to provide for my family and ensure that situation was right for us to move forward. And from that, I was then able to piecemeal, right, okay, how do I do that? It's the hows, it's the whats, it's the where, it's those beautiful open-ended questions to get you to think, maybe with some creative tools as well. So how could I do that? What are the options? One-to-one coaching, group coaching, where could I do it? What's around me? Who do I speak to? Where do I go next? And then it's all about proactive steps to make that happen. And sure, you'll get something wrong along the way. I do, I learn from it, but then I move forward. It's about that resilience level as well, picking up and keep going forward. But to your point, it is understanding the why. And speaking to somebody really helps. If you don't know, helps get that out of you sometimes.
From what I just gathered, from what you just said, it's really important to be able to ask yourself great questions, because that's really the only way you're going to get great answers. But those answers that you get from those great questions that you ask yourself seem to be the stepping stones to action. And
Yeah,
without action, there is no realization of goals, dreams, plans, any of that, because you do have to take action in order for things to happen. It can't be just willful thinking, as some, there's some schools of thought, oh, just think it and it will be. That's
no,
never been my
absolutely.
experience. I need to take action. I need to think about it, and I need to wrap my brain around the fact that I do want this. I want XYZ, and I will get XYZ. So how do I do that? That's a great question. How, what, when, all those kinds of questions that start with those create a dialogue in your brain with yourself in order to create these action steps that are necessary to get to that point B, to get that
Absolutely.
XYZ.
Do you know what, Susie? That's a really interesting point, actually. And for those who might be familiar already, or those who aren't familiar, there's a fantastic model by Sir John Whitmore, who I think he popularized it back in the 90s. It's called the GROW model. And the GROW literally is an acronym. So you've got G for goal, R for realism, O for opportunity or options, and W for will to action. So when you're setting any kind of plan, this is a really great template to follow, in that, what is your goal? What is your realistic circumstance? So therefore, what are you able to achieve with either resource around you, homeschooling, financials, people to support you? What does that really look like? What your barriers might be? What are your opportunities when you come to O? So what are the options and opportunities for you to seize on? How do you overcome barriers? What are the options in order for you to move forward? Who do you contact as well? And then the W is the will to action. Will you do it? Can you do it? And that sequence, it's got to be sustainable. Now, when this year first started, I had a plan for the first week coming back to work, doing X, Y, and Z, get myself ready for the year. I'd already decorated my room, so that was done. But I had a whole sequence of things I wanted to do. Then we got lockdown again in the UK, which meant we are homeschooling. So that radically changes everything. But I forgot to change my plan. So I felt like I was failing. I felt like I wasn't achieving because I didn't move things around. So everything has to be sustainable, because there's so much joy and celebration you get from actually achieving something that then propels you to carry on afterwards. Okay, I've done that. Even if it's not quite as successful as you would like it to have been, you've completed it. So you can move on to the next step. So it's a beautiful cycle to help you move from where you are into wherever you want to go.
That sounds like a plan that helps to set a person up for success.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I've made this mistake where I've created these crazy, unrealistic plans, if you will, to achieve something. And I'd have to be a superwoman to have achieved it through the plans that I set up. And so I automatically assumed that I failed at it. Instead of creating realistic plans,
Yeah.
something that you can achieve something every day towards that plan. If you can, or once a week, be able to set these milestones that are achievable, like chunk it down into achievable steps so that you can celebrate those small victories. And then when you look back, you're like, wow, I did 10 small victories. They've added up. And
Yeah.
now you feel like you've succeeded versus failed, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a great mindset to have. And it really helps you take that next step and that next point of action and keep you on the path, particularly if you're making radical change.
Yes, absolutely. Natalie, what would you say to somebody who is considering carving a new path? I mean, is there a small piece of advice that you would give, a direction that you would give to be able to, like, what's one of the first things they can do to be able to start to carve out a new path for themselves?
I mean, I think you touched on it well earlier when you said the why. It's really good to understand why we're doing something. What is the reason behind it? From that, connecting with people, it's key. And I think, particularly in this world that we're living in at the moment, because we're so isolated, because we've lost that connection with folk. And at the end of the day, we're a tribal species at heart. When you look at all of the data and the kind of research that you see, all of those beautiful chemicals that get, distributed in our body, the serotonin when we hug, that when we're kind, there's other ones on it. Meditating brings out the serotonin, dopamine when you self-care, endorphins for exercise, and so on. We're missing that connection and that general kind of thing that produces those. So I know from my experience last year as well, connection is really key. That also helps you understand, and if you're connecting with people that are on the path or the direction that you want to go, they can give you advice as well. And I certainly experienced that in bucket loads last year. So that's really important. Learn at every opportunity. Take on board what folks say. Some of it might be relevant, some of it might not be, but really try to learn at every opportunity. If it's in keeping with where you want to go, pick up as much as you can and be open and flexible to change. That's, again, like I mentioned earlier, with the homeschooling this year. And I think for everybody, actually, 2020 has thrown so many curveballs that we've just literally had to adapt to and change to. So we've really got to, whilst we have our goals, whilst we have our plan, whilst we have okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z to get to, A, B, and C, be flexible that might change.
I love that. That being said, though, I think a lot of people might struggle with understanding how they can be open and flexible to change. It's one thing to say it. It sounds like definitely we should be open and flexible to change. But a lot of people fear change. They fear it worse than death. Like they just like their comfort zones. And you're right. This past year was full of change, and we don't know what the future holds. It could be full of more changes. How does somebody deal with those changes as they're being tossed at them?
Be kind to yourself. Wholeheartedly be kind to yourself. And I'm going to draw on the experience from the 2 weeks ago again, just for this, although I've got a myriad from last year as well. When I wasn't achieving what I wanted to because of homeschooling, and I had my head and my heart set. I'm going to start this year. I've got a clean path ahead of me. Yes, we're still in a kind of challenging time with COVID, but I know my sequence. Take the boys to school, pick them up. I've got a nice window of opportunity in between to work. All of a sudden, that was destroyed with homeschooling. So I had to change, but I wasn't being kind to myself to allow myself almost a little bit of a grieving process that, oh, for crying out loud, I've got to do it again. It's a bit like the Kubler-Ross curve, the grief or five stages of grief that folk referred to.
Yes.
But effectively, it's a change curve. You get the shock, you get the anger, you get the frustration. You then, you're at the bottom. This is the lowest part. You then start to see optimism, and then I was at the top at the end. I've got my vision ahead, and then all of a sudden, someone just flicked me back onto the other angle. What's going on? So it's appreciating that you're going to go through those cycles, you're going to experience those feelings and those sensations, and that's okay. We all do. Be kind to yourself. Take yourself off to do whatever self-care that you need to do that will help. Go meditate, do your walk, whatever that is for you, because we're all different. But be kind to yourself, I think.
I like that. And it reminds me of the idea that life is full of ebbs and flows, and that the highs and lows of life, actually, there are lessons to be learned in both the highs and the lows. And it's near impossible to live in one extreme or the other, right? There's always, I think the goal for me anyway, is to get to that middle ground where when I'm dealing with a low, I realize that it feels like it's forever, but I know everything is temporary in life. And if I can just embrace the lessons that that low is giving me, that is when I feel like I'm lifted up and I can get to that middle ground. And then when I reach the high, we all want to stay there, but we know that that's not sustainable either. That's also an extreme, and that also has lessons as well. And so I always feel like you should never fear either one of those. And but you should
Yeah.
strive for learning the lessons from both and kind of bringing yourself back to that middle ground, and know that you're gonna go down, you're gonna go up. And I also feel like if we didn't have the lows in life, we would never appreciate the highs in life. So I think of the highs and lows as the valleys and the hills. And I've heard that analogy. I'm sure I've read it in many different
I'm
places.
sure.
I don't know who to attribute that to, but the hills and the valleys, they each have their lessons. And if you stand on a hill for your whole life, which is the highs, you're never going to appreciate the beauty that the valleys do have. Right? So the lows
Absolutely.
in life do have beauties, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time. If you look around and you say to yourself, I want to find the beauty in this, or the purpose in this, or the value in this low, your brain is going to go into automatic search mode and find it. And
Yeah,
then you're going to find what that purpose was. And that's going to help you lift again to that middle ground. So
absolutely.
yeah, it's just important to keep that perspective. And that perspective has helped me. It's not always easy. When you're stuck in that low, you just feel like you're stuck there forever. But it's knowing ahead of time, planning ahead of time for those moments when you're going to reach those lows, to remember, seek it, seek the lesson in that. And then
Yeah.
you will find the lesson in that. And then that will help you get to another hill where you'll see the beautiful valleys and accompanying hills. And then, you'll find that middle ground where you can take a break and rest and enjoy life.
It's a bit like I mean, I think I mentioned gratitude before as well, having gratitude for what you have. And sometimes we take things for granted. So actually, gratitude journals are really beneficial in this regard. But it's recognizing it, particularly if you are going through change or you're struggling with the change. Okay, what do I have at the moment? What went well? What's going on despite the change around us, despite adversity? What's actually going well? And to your point with the valleys, looking at them and appreciating them and being grateful for them, and then you can move on. Because when you start to see things, when you start to appreciate, and when that starts to become second nature, it helps you move forward. When you can see the beauty, when you can see the happiness, when you can see even if it's teeny tiny bits of light, it will then help you see something else next time. So it is a bit of a reframe. It is changing the narrative a bit. It is converting the negative to the positive and trying to pull out what is good with what's going on.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Natalie, is there anything else that you'd like to add that you feel would lend value to this whole topic of starting a new journey?
I think probably, yeah, just reiterating those points actually. Self-care is 100%, 150% super important. And I've certainly learned that over the recent year. And I'm sure others have as well, because we've been so isolated, because we haven't had the usual I don't even know how to describe it, because we haven't been inundated with things around us. We've had to take the opportunity to look at what's important around us and focus on what makes us happy, because we aren't seeing folks. So self-care is really, really, really important. And, allowing yourself to do that. So being kind in that sense as well. The connection I've touched on. So I've written down one note here, actually: saying yes to things that terrify you. And I know it's terrifying. I really know it's terrifying. But do you know what? Once you've said yes to something, even if, again, it didn't go quite how you want to, you'll feel epic. I mean, the feeling you get on the other side far outweighs the terror you might have up front. So definitely say yes to something that terrifies you. I contributed to an article in The Guardian, which is a UK paper, before Christmas. That then lent itself for me being invited on a radio show. Now, I'd never done that before, and I was terrified, but I just thought to myself, do you know what? Just go for it. What truly is the worst that can happen? You'll never get invited on again. I got invited on 4 days later. So,
Amazing.
yeah, just go, honestly, just go for it, truly. And just help support changing the narrative to help you move forward. I can do things. I will do things. When I first started training to be a coach, I had this narrative in my head. I'll never be taken seriously as a coach because I'm from another industry. And that was my dialogue I was telling myself. I reframed it and I said to myself, do you know what? I will be taken incredibly seriously as a coach because I've got such a great reputation in my other career. And I mean, even you might hear it in the inflection in my voice, that promotes positive thinking. It changes how you think, and it enables you to think differently and actually believe, do you know what, I can do this. So yeah, I'd say those were top tips, maybe.
I love that. At any moment, we can reframe our story.
Yeah,
At any moment, we can change our story by reframing it.
totally.
Yeah.
How you tell yourself what's going on. Yeah.
I love that. And I specifically also love the saying yes to something that terrifies you. I'm a firm believer in that. I've done that many times in my life, and it is the most empowering feeling to overcome something like that. Like you said, even if you weren't successful in the way that you wanted it to be,
Yeah.
you still did it. And so you feel like a superwoman when you get done. I mean, I've done that with power tools. I was afraid of power tools. I was afraid of scuba diving. I was afraid of public speaking. And I just said yes to it. And now I don't fear those things anymore. I actually look forward to those things. So
That's
it's
amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
hmm So Natalie, how can people connect with you?
So I've rather brilliantly, or at least I thought so at the time when I did it, because I changed my company, NMS Coaching. You can find me everywhere. My handle is at NMS Coaching, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm sure I'm missing one. LinkedIn, I'm actually my name, Natalie Miller Snell, but I think that's all. Anyway, at NMS Coaching, you'll find me everywhere.
Excellent. Do you have a website that you want to direct people to?
Oh, yes, nmscoaching.co.uk. Or in fact, actually, if you put my name in again, nataliemillersnell.co.uk or nataliemillersnell.com, it'll all direct there.
Perfect. And what I will do is, for anybody listening, I'm going to be putting all of this information on how you can connect with Natalie and any resources that she talked about. I know that the Grow resource,
Yes.
I'd like to be able to put that in the show notes as well, so people can find that information and connect with you too.
Perfect.
Yeah, you're a star. I love it.
Oh, bless you. And if anyone listening wants to just drop me a line to talk about coaching or understand a bit more about it, please feel free. I love talking about it. So if you want an idea or even just a tidbit on, how maybe is best to do this or what do you suggest on that, please just drop me a line. I'd love to talk to you.
That's great. Natalie, it has been great chatting with you today. Thank you so much for coming on to the Curves Welcome podcast.
My absolute pleasure.
Hey friends, thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's topic. If there is something you'd enjoy exploring in a future podcast, please reach out to me via my website at curveswelcome.com and I'll work it in. While you're there, grab a free story too. It's my way of thanking you for your support of my podcast and romance novels. I also want to take a moment to thank all who have become patrons of my Patreon page. Your support means a great deal to me. For more information on joining me on this journey and gaining access to special rewards, visit the link in the show notes. Also, be sure to follow the Curves Welcome podcast channel to keep up on the latest episodes. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time, go out there and continue to learn, grow, and embrace life's curves.